Hi, this is Scott. How you doing? So in this video we're going to discuss mask issue number 4. Now, last week's video, if you saw it, it was a bit fun. It was really fun driving about in Rhino, going from page to page. This particular video was meant to be something plain, something simple, back to the normal, sitting in the room, just videoing it, talking to camera, editing it all together. However, I let some of my work colleagues view the video, one of them being a guy called David Brownlee. And David Brownlee said, "Scott, have you ever thought about doing this? Or what about doing that?" That got the brain cells thinking, oh, could I do this? Could I do that? And what he suggested actually tied in very nicely with issue 4 of the M.A.S.K UK comic, which will become apparent as we go through it. So, when I was a kid, there was a lot of things I wanted to do. Like most kids, I guess, I wanted to be in a band, but I can't sing and I can't play a musical instrument. I wanted to be in the film and TV, but I can't act. There was other things I wanted to do as well, like I wanted to be a toy designer, which came through my love of M.A.S.K, which actually I took art and design and technical drawing at school, both with the intentions of eventually becoming a toy designer, and that's never happened either. There was one other job that I really wanted to do when I was a kid, and this video is going to give me the opportunity to actually make that dream become a reality. And I hope you bear with me one moment.
Condor 1, come in, over. This is Boulder Hill Flight Control. You are go for takeoff. Go for takeoff.
Well, that's us got clearance for takeoff for this issue of M.A.S.K. So let's fly through this comic and see how it goes. Wow, looks like we've landed on the front cover. So, many of you, maybe like me, would have had a love of things like Airwolf and Blue Thunder when you were younger. And who knew that the first helicopter to ever get a shot of actually flying would be Condor? How brilliant is that? One of my favourites, and if you're like me, most M.A.S.K fans, it was probably the first toy you ever got in the M.A.S.K collection. So, let's have a look around this cover and see what we've got. So on the very front page we have various images of Thunderhawk. It looks like it's been shot down and it says Thunderhawk Death Dive, and Matt shouting, "We're losing control, stand by for crash landing." Now this is a great image. The only thing I'm not keen about on this particular cover is the fact that we have Thunderhawk going in one direction, then as it's crash landing it seems to be coming in a slightly opposite direction. It kind of distracts from the image slightly for me, but apart from that I do love this image. Like last month we had a free cut out M.A.S.K within the pages of the comic. So in this one it says make your own Bruce Sato lifter M.A.S.K, which we'll come on to once we get into the comic itself. Now as normal it's a wraparound cover, okay? So we're going to look in the back now and we'll see Hondo McLean wearing his blaster mask, and we also see Dusty Hayes' backlash mask. So we have to assume that just the mask is talking, that Dusty must be inside this mask. So Hondo's saying, Matt's in trouble, blaster mask ready. And then we hear Dusty saying, backlash all set, Venom won't get away with this. And below that we can see that Cliff Dagger is in Jackhammer, and it's actually Jackhammer that's fired upon Thunderhawk, and that's why Thunderhawk is now crashing. Now this again is another great image. The image of Jackhammer looks so much like the toy, it is unbelievable. The only thing I would say is that the cannons on the turret seem to be slightly one on top of each other rather than side by side. Small critique, but it's a brilliant image nonetheless. Now, I'm not too sure if you'll make it out on the image that when I eventually edit it all together, up in the top corner, there is the name of Hastings. So, as I said previously, I used to collect the M.A.S.K comic when I was a kid. I still have all of my M.A.S.K comics, but they're kind of stored away and I don't want to bring them out in case they get damaged. This was a second set of M.A.S.K comics that I bought from eBay a couple of years ago. It cost me about £18 and I got almost the full set, not just quite all of them. Now in the UK, what would happen is you go to your local newsagent. You wouldn't normally buy comics from a comic shop because those weren't really available in the UK back in those days. So you go to your newsagent and you'd ask your newsagent obviously to order it for you. So this Hastings person must be the person who initially bought this comic. Whether it was them that I got this directly from, I'm not too sure. Whether they sold it on and it's maybe changed hands a couple of times, honestly I don't know. But certainly on some of the collection I have, it does say Hastings on it. So this particular issue, issue number 4, is dated the 6th to the 19th of December 1986. And in the top corner beside the M.A.S.K banner, we have the TV winner. Okay, so whether or not the comic worked closely with TV station, whatever, to get some cross publicity, I'm not too sure, but certainly in most of the comics it does talk about it being a TV favourite. Sorry? Yep. Okay, so it's time to move on to the next page. So I'm just going to fly away there now and I'll catch you on the inside. Okay, so we've landed on the first page on the inside. We're on part 3 of the story Monster Mountain. So we get a recap that a bomb has gone off, blown the top off of Eagle Mountain in the Bavarian Alps, and this has caused an incredible lava to come down the south side of the hill. Now this page very much is all a sort of recap of what's happened in the previous issue. We've got Scott, Matt and T-Bob in Thunderhawk flying about, and they're discussing again about the monster of Gishmael. We've got the lava coming down, and it's very much a recap. When you read it again, it is very much a recap, whereas when you were younger and you read it, you're like, oh, this is great. But you might have sort of forgotten, because it's fortnightly, what actually happened. So we're still talking about the fact of that Matt obviously believes that Venom must be involved in this, because why else would this be happening? We then go into the next page, and again we sort of get a recap that Cliff Dagger's not still quite sure what's going on. He's a bit bored. Sly Rax is saying, do we not have a yo-yo for him to play with to Miles Mayhem? And Miles Mayhem quips back, he'd only trip over the string. And obviously we want to see what's going to happen. Now, because Dagger is bored, and we've already got the lava coming down the hill, Mayhem suggests to Dagger, just to get him out of the way basically, well, why don't you just put Torch on and go and cause some fire of yourself? You might as well, the lava's destroying everything anyway, so why don't you just add to the mayhem? So that's what he does, and he goes off. So then we see some of the lava coming down, and basically the hillside is now destroyed. So let's fly on to the next page and see what happens. So, as we land on this page, we see this fantastic image of this beast frozen in ice, this Cyclops giant. So what then happens is we see this hand coming out from the ice, and it says here, massive gnarled hands claw their way upwards. And then watching from above in Thunderhawk, we've got Matt, Scott and T-Bob, and Scott is the first person to see this. And he shouts, "Oh, look there! I don't believe it really is a giant." So obviously Matt takes action. And then he says, "Hang on, got to get this right. Going in for a dive attack. Stand by, all bombs, Scott." So basically, he's telling Scott to stand by as he's going to drop all the bombs. Well, do we really want a 10-year-old child interfering with our destiny in such a way? I'm not too sure, especially as we know that he's always getting into trouble. Then we've gone on to Miles Mayhem and his team, and they see Thunderhawk up in the air, and Miles Mayhem's like, "What's M.A.S.K doing here? Oh no, what's going on?" So basically, Cliff Dagger gets into the gun turret of Jackhammer and fires upon Thunderhawk in order to try and bring her down. So this goes on, and we see Thunderhawk spiralling down out of action. However, M.A.S.K team already have the reinforcements on hand. Now, in this particular image, I'm a little bit confused, because obviously this relates back to the front cover. So we've got Dusty Hayes with Backlash, and we've got Honda McLean with Blaster. However, the vehicle that's in the background is Condor. Why is it Condor? Why is it not Gator? I'm not really understanding this, because we don't see Brad Turner, yet we see Condor. So I don't get it. It's a single seat vehicle. We've got two M.A.S.K agents with the wrong vehicle. I'm not too sure exactly what's going on. So what happens anyway is they both rush to put their masks on, and Dusty Hayes uses Backlash to sort of veer Thunderhawk away from where he's going. And then what happens is Honda McLean uses Blaster Mask guidance control systems on Blaster to take control of Thunderhawk to help guide it away. Now, I'm a bit confused by this, because obviously in some of the information that we get, his mask acts a bit like, I guess, like Cyclops from the X-Men, where the laser blast actually comes out of his visor. But I believe in some of the information it says that Blaster is a laser guidance system for rockets for lasers that's on his shoulders. So I'm a bit confused by this and how it can control Thunderhawk. But anyway, Thunderhawk manages to clear the top of the mountain by a few centimetres and lands. So let's take off and see what happens on the next page. Okay, so as we land, we see Dusty and Hondo congratulating each other because they just managed to help Matt Tracker and Thunderhawk escape. We then see Matt still trying to gain control of Thunderhawk, T-Bob getting in the way as usual, talking about wanting to get into the ejector seat of Thunderhawk to get out, and Matt telling Scott to tell him to shut up. Then what happens is we see this monster coming out from all of the ice, and they spot it. Then we see Dusty and Hondo terrified. They're still beside Condor, but for some reason their masks are now on the floor beside them as they're kind of shivering away, kind of looking as really scared. Which I don't understand. Why have they taken their masks off? Why hadn't you kept your masks on? And why do we still have Condor? I still don't understand this. Then we see a brief snippet of Mayhem and his minions talking about the fact that he now needs to, that the giant is out and he now wants to make it work the way that he wants to. So then it says next, Viper and the giant. So obviously that gets us a bit confused as to, well, what do we mean? We know obviously what Viper is. Viper is obviously Miles Mayhem's mask. We know what the giant is, so is he going to get in a fight with it? Who knows? We'll need to wait to the next issue to find out. So we then go over the next page, and we're now on to the Great Head Robbery Part 4. So if you remember from the previous issues, basically Miles Mayhem's taken off the head of the Statue of Liberty, we've replaced it with a fake one, and Jack Hammer is placed in there with all guns blazing. They've destroyed basically lower Manhattan and the place is desolate now. So what's happened is, because they've caused so much destruction to Manhattan, Manhattan has now been completely evacuated. So Mayhem lands with Rax in Switchblade. Now, I said in a comment in a previous video about the fact that Switchblade was only meant to be a single-seater, but we've seen in both the comics and in the cartoons that it suits the storyline, so sometimes it's got 2 seats, sometimes it's got more. We'll see in a couple of pages time something that might even add to this. So the two of them land, and what then happens is we see these big purple bulldozers smashing through into banks and stealing gold bullion, with the Venom logo quite clearly emblazoned on the back of the closest one to us. So this is a plan all along. We destroy Manhattan, we get everyone out, all the police, everything's destroyed, and they can just go on and take whatever they want. So let's see how they get on when we fly on to the next page. I'm still getting used to these landings. This is so much fun though. So what happens is Miles Mayhem is gloating about the fact he's now an instant trillionaire with all the gold bullion and money that they're managing to steal from the banks. Rax is a bit concerned though that the police might show up and might, you know, put paid to all their plans. However, Mayhem has to remind him that Rax is in the mouth of the Statue of Liberty with Jack Hammer, all guns blazing everywhere. And then we then see an image of some police helicopters getting shot out of the sky as Dagger fires upon them. Then Rax is gloating about the fact that he sunk Rhino to the bottom of the sea, as in last issue, when he knocked out the legs of the jetty and the jetty fell down and Rhino with it. So obviously our M.A.S.K team are now completely aware of the fact that this is what's going on, the fact that this is all happening. But they know that the immediate concern is to get rid of Cliff Dagger and the guns in the head of Statue of Liberty, because until they do that they can't do anything else. But of course he's reminded, well, we don't have Thunderhawk, we don't have Rhino, what on earth are you going to do, Matt? So Matt has a plan. He then runs over to Brad Turner, who's there with Condor, brilliant vehicle. Absolutely brilliant. So he runs over to him and says, look, basically, can I hitch a lift? Brad's like, well, it's the first time I've ever done this, do you know what I mean? Let's see, because it's only designed for one person. Not saying you're fat, Matt, but hey. So what happens is we then see an image of Matt on the back holding on for dear life onto the supports that support the rotor blades behind me here. So they're flying in low towards the Statue of Liberty, keeping it low to try and keep off the radar. However, Cliff Dagger has this warning coming up because, yeah, it has picked up the fact that there is something on its way there. So he turns the head round on the Statue of Liberty and then starts firing on our M.A.S.K heroes. So what happens? Well, we'll have to fly on to the next page to find out, won't we? See you there. Okay, so we've landed on the last page of the Great Head Robbery, which is our colour strip in this issue of M.A.S.K. So basically, as the Statue of Liberty's head turns round and they start firing at Rhino, we then gain some height so that Matt can drop down from above and use Spectrum's free fall ability. An ability which, according to the toy, that it doesn't have, but hey, we know that it does in the cartoon, so we might as well keep that. So what then happens is he then manages to make its way inside the Statue of Liberty's ear. He thinks he's going to get in undetected. However, Cliff Dagger, surprisingly, is aware of what he's trying to do. He's used enough intelligence to know, okay, Tracker's trying to get in, and he's already there and fires his torch mask at him. So what then happens is we're then left with him trying to burn Matt Tracker, and it says, next, things are hotting up. So we need to wait for another 2 weeks to see what happens. So we then move on to the next storyline. Now the next storyline is only a one shot. It's only in this episode, this issue. It's called Battle of the Alps. And what you'll tend to find with some of the storylines in the M.A.S.K universe in the comics is some of the storylines in each issue might have similar themes. So in the Great Head Robbery, what we're trying to do is we're trying to steal all this gold bullion and stuff from Manhattan. What's happening now is we're now in Switzerland, and this unassuming helicopter's flying across one of the largest banks in Switzerland, as there's a weekly transfer of bullion going on, and they think, oh, it's just a pure innocent helicopter flying about, until it turns into jet mode and we realise it's Switchblade and it starts to attack. So again, it's bullion that we're after, very much similar to the last story. So there's all these similarities that will crop up that do make you feel like some of the stories are quite similar. Maybe it's like an album. When you buy an album, sometimes there's themes throughout the songs, make it easier for you to understand. I'm not too sure. Maybe they just didn't realise that kids would twig on that the storylines are very similar. So as he sweeps in, Miles Mayhem has this thing that he says, where he says, "Feel the strength of Switchblade and tremble, makers of clocks and chocolate." Not too sure if you get away with that sort of thing these days. It's a bit derogatory against the Swiss. I'm sure they do other things than make chocolate and make clocks. And he fires a rocket in and we see this big kaboom as it hits, and we see this lorry getting shattered and people getting blown everywhere. So let's take off and see how we get on in the rest of this strip. So, as we land, Miles Mayhem is still flying about, and he says, "The guards will give no more trouble. You can now move in, Scorch and Stinger." Now the words Scorch and Stinger are in bold capital letters. And you're like, okay, well, but why Scorch and Stinger doesn't... So what then happens is, in the next image, we see Sly Rax driving Piranha, and Cliff Dagger is in the sidecar sub as they drive along. And it says the code names belong to Cliff Dagger and Sly Rax, Mayhem's henchmen. Okay, but they don't. I'm not too sure what exactly they went wrong there, because obviously it should be Blaster and Wrecker are the code names for these two gentlemen. So I'm not too sure whether at this point the makers of the comic didn't have the right information or they were just making it up. I'm not too sure. But anyway, so we see this image and they head the way to the bank, and we see this beautiful shot of Sly Rax pulling a wheelie with the sidecar sub as they come into the bank area, and they're told to get on and take all the gold bullion out of the bank because the guards won't be any more problem. Now, the one thing I'm not too keen about this storyline is you've got 6 images, 6 cells along the cartoon, the comic. But there's a big border between each one. So there's a lot of unused space in this page, and I would have just loved to have seen it just filled in a wee bit more, give us a wee bit more action, but unfortunately it doesn't. So we now move on to the next page, and what's happened is the police have turned up, they're scratching their heads as to say, well, all this gold's gone, what's happened to all this gold? Then Matt Tracker turns up, and they've been instructed by the PNA about what's happened, so obviously Matt Tracker has turned up, he's on the scene. So what then happens is we then see from the point of view of the Venom team. So we've got Miles Mayhem flying about in Switchblade, we've got Sly Rax still in Piranha, driving down this road down the Alps, and we've got this van behind that's being driven by Cliff Dagger. Cliff Dagger then gets on the walkie-talkie because there's this big lorry following behind. He's like, oh, there's a big lorry following behind me. I'm not too sure what's going on. He's driving like an idiot. Who is he? So what then happens is Miles Mayhem shouts at him and says, that's a M.A.S.K vehicle. It's Rhino. And we see the guns come down on Rhino, which is an absolutely stunning image. The fact that the artist has drawn it from so low down, looking up the way, it just makes Rhino look a lot bigger. It just gives it the size that it needs to make it look as big as it actually is. So let's see if our M.A.S.K team can beat Venom yet again. So we arrive just as Matt Tracker is saying, give it up, Mayhem, you can't get away now. And Mayhem must be shouting back because his words are bolder than Matt Tracker's. You dare to order me, I shall crush you like an ant. So what happens is Switchblade is swooping in, fires a Stinger rocket at Rhino. However, Rhino's already fired a missile. And they meet, they explode in the air, but they're quite close to Switchblade. That kind of knocks Switchblade away, so that's quite good. So that's him sort of not completely out of the action, but knocked for 6, shall we say, so he goes flying off into the distance. Rhino then gets close up behind the lorry that's still being driven by Cliff Dagger and uses the battering ram on the front of Rhino to shunt him forward. Sly Rax is in the way because he's still obviously at the front of the lorry, and they then get pushed off the edge of the road and off the side of the mountain. Now, as Matt says on the next page, it wasn't intentional. That's not what he meant to do. However, it did have the effect of he's managed to stop them. So what happens is Switchblade comes in again, but Rhino fires at him again and he flies away. We then find out that Rax and Dagger have ended up in the water. So luckily, it's in a lake. So luckily, Sly Rax jumps into the sub and he's pulling Cliff Dagger along, and Cliff Dagger's managed to get a couple of bars of the gold bullion, which he was hoping to keep for himself, but Miles Mayhem isn't zipped up the back, so he knows what's going on, and he's like, no, you fools, this is mine, this is my gold, blah 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 blah. So that was that. That was the end of that story. So we're now going to head on to our centre page. Now, can you guess what it is? I did say earlier on that there was a reason for this issue and why this would all fit in. So let's fly off and then let's see what we've got in the centre page, shall we? So, one thing I'm glad of, if you remember in the last episode there was this big gaping hole in my comic, and I still don't understand that, but we did manage to fix that up and it was fine. So we've landed here in Condor to discuss Condor. Now this is a brilliant image, absolutely brilliant, but I do have a slight issue with it. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at the images and then we'll discuss and see what happens, okay? So it says pilot Brad Turner and we've got M.A.S.K, Hocus Pocus. So we already know that now that we've been round about M.A.S.K for 36 years. But back then we didn't know this information. So we see Condor in its motorcycle mode and then we see it in its helicopter mode. And if you've got the box for Condor, this image of Condor is very similar to the one that's on the box for the toy. Very, very similar. I'll do a comparison when I edit it all together. And I think that's perhaps what my biggest issue is. This image is too much just a drawing of the toy rather than trying to make it look like a real vehicle, if that makes sense. The detailing is great, the image is absolutely brilliant, but it just looks too much like the toy art to show the fact that it's a toy, rather than art to make it look like it's part of this comic and part of actually a real world vehicle. So it says down the bottom, top secret information, M.A.S.K motorcycle helicopter equipped with nose cannon that fires an antimatter ray, capable of instantly breaking down most substances including bullets and cannon shells, which we saw last week when there was some gunfire at Alex sector and he managed to take some bullets out of the air by using the antimatter ray. Condor's belly cannons fire a laser guide for the bike to track along when travelling at speeds of up to Mach 1, the speed of sound. So when it's in motorcycle mode, you can use the laser guided to track along Mach 1 along the ground. Now, I'm not big on speed and things like that, but my understanding is that the speed of sound at ground level is different from the speed of Mach 1 in the air. Someone might correct me on that, I'm not too sure, but I think the higher you go, there's a difference in the speed that Mach 1 actually is. So by saying Mach 1, the speed of sound, well, we know that that's what it is. That's a definitive rather than X amount of miles per hour or whatever it might be. As much as I think this is a great image, like I say, it does look very much like the toy. Nothing wrong with that, because I love the toy. Like I say, it's the first toy I ever bought, and it's probably the same for many of you watching just now, that this is probably the first, and for some people maybe the only M.A.S.K toy that they ever owned, and it's still a classic today. So now that we've had a look at Condor, let's fly on and see what the second half of this comic has to offer. So we've now reached the conclusion of War of Venom. Now, if you remember from the last couple of issues, we have Miles Mayhem has freed some dictators from a country that borders on another country, and then got them all riled up to then start a war with this country, and this other country don't have any protection because they don't have any army or weapons because they've been at peace for so long that they didn't need it. We left off last issue with Dusty Hayes all confused in the battlefield as some tanks was approaching, and we had Buddy Hawks in Rhino's ATV heading towards Dusty to help save him. Now, when we saw Buddy Hawks last time, he mentioned something about taking the most direct route through. Yet we didn't actually see him using Penetrator, we didn't see him going through the tanks. So what we do now is we now see him activating Penetrator and then driving through the tanks in order to get a safe journey to get towards Dusty Hayes, to get there quicker, easier, and to pick him up. And obviously all the soldiers are all amazed that this vehicle's just driven right through them and they can't understand it. So as they get closer, he picks up Dusty, and Dusty just climbs on the back. He holds on to what would be the fifth wheel that comes up to cause the wee armour plated bit at the back of the driver to stop him from getting shot, and he's riding on the back. The closest thing I can imagine this to is if you've ever been to the Dodgems and you're driving about in your Dodgem and someone gets stuck and the guy from the shows has to come across and he hangs on the back trying to tell you how to steer it. That is for me what that reminds me of. Maybe not all of you have experienced that at the Dodgems, I don't know. So what then happens is that obviously we then see this general in a tank, and this guy's going, "Sir, the M.A.S.K trash are getting away." And then the commander's going, "Forget them, we'll go for a bigger prize. All tanks, destroy the Sandurian town." So they want to go and destroy this town. We then see Alex Sector flying, still relieved, I guess, from the last issue when he got saved from Brad in Condor. So he says, "Those tanks will slaughter thousands of defensive civilians. What can we do?" And Brad goes, "Leave this to me. Hocus pocus, activate." So what then happens is he uses Hocus Pocus to create a mirror image of all of the tanks, to make it look like there's another fleet of tanks coming towards the baddies. And the baddies are looking at them thinking, "Oh, we didn't think that they had any weapons. What's going on here? How have they got an army? Where did all these tanks come from?" And as someone says, one of the guys says, "We must turn back. We're so evenly balanced that we'll just wipe each other out and no one will win." So that's what they do. They turn around and set tail back the way. And then we see Alex congratulating Brad Turner on a job well done. Unfortunately though, there's still some jet fighters and bombers in the air flying towards the town, ready to blow them up. So luckily we still have Matt Tracker and Bruce Sattel and Thunderhawk. So they decide that they're going to go after them. So let's see how they get on in the next page. So we see these bombers still on course to flying towards this town. Matt Tracker and Bruce Sattel flying in Thunderhawk aim straight towards them and fly right through them, sending off rockets and all sorts. But not only they find weapons from Thunderhawk, we have the guys hanging out the side of Thunderhawk using Spectrum Mask and Lifter Mask to cause the airplanes to fly out of the way and disorientate them and all sorts of things. However, it's quite a big fleet of aircraft. I'm not too sure where this small town got all these planes from. They probably seem to have a bigger air force than some countries like the UK have at the moment. So what then happens is they think, oh, we're never going to manage this. We're never going to be able to stop them all. However, Matt Tracker has a cunning plan. But his cunning plan involves Rhino. So they have to come in and land and then jump into Rhino. He then sets the bomb in Rhino, the missile in Rhino, to aim for this hillside. They fire it and it blows up, and there's dust and debris and everything flies into the air. And as it does so, we then see Bruce Sattel using his lifter mast to lift all of the debris and then cause it to swirl out around all the jets and stuff. So obviously jets don't like stuff going into the air intakes, do they? So all of these stones and everything flying through their jet intakes cause some of them to blow up. The pilots are getting disorientated because they can't see where they're going because of all this. So we see some crashing into each other and whatever. And eventually they turn around and fly back. And then they decide to go back. As it says, we've won, someone says, I think it's Bruce. And then Matt says, not quite. Now must move in on the Tigmulian capital. We must free the Tigmulian people from the venom-backed dictators. However, by the time they get back there, the people already realise that they're getting help. They're getting help to get rid of these dictators, so they're already revolting as it is. So they've already started Viva la Revolution in order to get rid of these dictators. So let's see how they get on the final page of this story. So we then land as we see the dictator's palace with bricks coming in through the windows, and someone says, "Sir, the peasants are revolting." And Miles Mayhem quips back, "You're not exactly an oil painting yourself, gas brain. Out of my way." So he then says to his minions, Cliff and Rax, "You need to get us out of this country." So we then see an image of Sly Rat riding Piranha with Miles Mayhem unusually in the subcar. And then we see Cliff Dagger and Jackhammer all trying to evade everyone and trying to get back out of the country. It then finishes off to say that in a little bit of time, within days, the dictators are back in a jail. A peace treaty has been signed between the two countries, and there's a massive freedom celebration, and we see our masked heroes with flowers round their neck all being celebrated for a job well done. So that's obviously the end of that story, which is a shame in a way. But the good thing is that means that we'll start a brand new story in the next issue of M.A.S.K, so that's good to see. Then we turn over to see an advert. Now this is brilliant. In the UK we had a company called Panini. I'm not too sure how many other countries that they operate in. And we have a sticker album coming out. And this sticker album is, it says, now relive the exciting adventures of Matt Track and the M.A.S.K team in this new sticker album collection from Panini. Buy 2 packets of M.A.S.K stickers from your newsagent and get the album free. Album includes a pull-out colour wall poster which holds 18 super prismatic foil stickers. So you know the kids will run out and nag the parents to get this and add it to their collection, which is brilliant. I think I did have this, I'm not too sure if I still do, but if I did, I can't even remember if I completed it or not. It was quite some time ago. But the images that are in the sticker album are all taken from the cartoon, so you know that it's a familiar image that you're going to get. So let's see what we have after this advert. So on this page we have our usual letters page, and the last couple have been split down the middle vertically. This one's been split down the middle horizontally, so we have Mac Trackers, M.A.S.K section on the top, and then we have the Miles Mayhem Venom section at the bottom. So it's just your usual fare of letters coming in. We have a couple of pictures that's been drawn in. There's a picture of Thunderhawk by K. Reynolds of Kent, and then there's a picture of Piranha by Catherine Hurry of Hemel Hempstead. As I said in the last one, I'm still sceptical as to whether these were actually real people who sent these in, or whether it was people in the production of the comic who did that. Not too sure. I would like to think it real people who were sending them in by now. On the next page we have a Bruce Sato mask. We have the lifter mask, and it says, here's lifter mask to make. Cut out the mask, stick onto cardboard, pierce holes at the sides to fit elastic bands over your ears, and cut out the eyepieces, and you're all set to be Bruce Sato. Now, similar thing to the last one where we had another mask. You're meant to cut it out and stick it on the cardboard. I would hate to think that anyone actually did that. That would be such a shame to actually ruin this wonderful comic, and I hope that you didn't. But if you are buying a comic, as I did say last week, make sure all the pages are intact, make sure no one's cut any out, make sure no one's taken out the centre page spread, and make sure the cover is still attached to the comic. So, now that we've got that out of the way, let's see the next story. So, we've not long had an advert, and that's us got another one. The usual one that's been in every issue so far, the one with Rhino firing at Switchblade, which is a really great image, but we've discussed it so many times before now, we'll just bypass that one. And we'll go on to the concluding part of the Key of Solomon. Again, like the previous strip, it's a shame that it's finishing. However, you know what they say, all good things must come to an end. And that does mean that we'll get another brand new story in the next issue of M.A.S.K. Now, if you've already forgotten what's happened, basically Buddy Hawks has gone undercover. He's dressed up as this guy called the Toff. He had this fake idol, the false Cali of the Kush, which had some scroll documents in it, which are the Key of Solomon, with fitted a tracker on it. And also Buddy Hawks has been captured because he's been rumbled, shall we say, as to who he is. Now, if you had forgotten that, well, that's okay, because the first page of the comic is basically giving you a recap of that. A bit like the previous story, again, we're getting a recap of last week, so as you know exactly what has happened and what to expect in this one. So we've got an image of Switchblade flying overhead. We've got Jack Hammer, and we've got Piranha on the ground, all driving away. Now, in my previous comment about Switchblade, we mentioned that there was 2 people in it. We had Sly Rax as well as Miles Mayhem. Well, in this one, we've got 4 people. We've got Miles Mayhem flying it, and then behind it, we've got Buddy Hawks, who's been captured. There's this guy called Professor Mad Mulcahy, and a criminal pal of the Toffs, who was the guy who rumbled who Buddy Hawks actually is. So 4 people now in Switchblade, which is only meant to carry 1 people. But they're all gloating about the fact that they've got Buddy Hawks, and then we see Buddy Hawks thinking to himself, yeah, well, you've not got me beat. I'm going to get out of this, don't you worry. And he says, I can't just sit back and watch. So, was there a reason why he said that? Has this given him a clue to something? Well, let's find out. So, as we land on this page, we see Buddy Hawks thinking, yeah, there was an idea there. That's it. Watch. He's still got his watch on. His hands are tied, but he still has his mask watch on, so he activates it. And then a few moments later, we see Matt Tracker and Bruce Sato walking towards Rhino, and Alex Sector's there going, Matt, Bruce, Rhino's computer is picking up something. And Bruce saying, perhaps not is all lost. Then we go into the back of Rhino, and we see that basically we can detect this signal, and Matt Tracker deduces Buddy must still be wearing his watch. That's a bad mistake by Mayhem. And then Bruce Satos goes, but it's a lucky mistake for us, Matt. So then we see our team driving off. We've got Thunderhawk in the air, we've got Condor in the air, and then we've got Rhino, and we have Gator. Now, if I remember correctly from last time when I did a video, Gator was there as well, but we didn't actually see who was driving it. We didn't see any relevance to Gator being there. It was just sat around, but it didn't seem to be part of the team as they drove off for some reason. We're seeing it again, but again we're not really getting much context as to why it's there. We then see this mansion on a cliff with a lot of seagulls and everything flying around. If you've ever been to Scotland or England or anywhere in the UK, there's always a lot of seagulls flying around, so these are a kind of permanent thing. But I think it is actually France that they're still in, so France must get a lot of them as well. So we then flip over onto the next page, and this guy is now trying to get all the pages of the Key of Solomon in the right order, because obviously this key is going to give Miles all this power beyond belief. So what happens then is we then see Miles Mayhem with Viper on, and this guy says, yeah, well, all the pages in order, so just waiting for it to be intoned. And Miles Mayhem goes, excellent, if that is the case, you have both outlived your usefulness. So he then fires Viper at this guy, and you see him falling. He's got venom all over his neck, and another guy's now kneeling down. This Mad Mulcahy is kneeling down and going, no, no, please, not me. And then Miles Mayhem's like, what's that noise? And then the M.A.S.K team come, and then Miles Mayhem goes, I'm cornered. So I'm not too sure where the rest of the Venom team are. It only seems to be Miles Mayhem that's here. But because he sees all these vehicles, and it's only him, and he's got Switchblade, he thinks, well, I'm no match for all of these M.A.S.K vehicles. So he uses a remote control that then flies Switchblade overhead. Somehow, this ladder comes down on the outside, not too sure how, and he scurries up and makes off in Switchblade before the M.A.S.K team arrive. So let's see what happens on our final page. So, as our team arrive, Matt says, I thought we had him that time. And we then see Buddy Hawks going, Matt, there's still the Key of Solomon to deal with. So this Professor Mulcahy is stepping back towards the edge of the cliff. And he says, no, stay away, you can't have it. The key is mine, I am all powerful. And then they're going, give it up, Professor, hand over those pages. So what then happens is he then starts reciting these, I assume perhaps maybe Latin words, I'm not too sure, in order to do the incantation that's then going to make him all powerful. And then all of a sudden there's a gust of wind that blows all the pages away, but it's not really a gust of wind. What's happened is Bruce Sato has used his lifter mask and lifted all the pages away, and they fly out over the sea to be lost forever. The end. So we know that they've saved the day. The pages have gone. Hopefully if they've gone in the sea, they'll never be put back together again. They might be destroyed, they might be wrecked. But anyway, we finished that story. We'll get another one next week, and we turn over to see what's going on. And we see this big bold image that says, beware the savage sumos in the next issue of M.A.S.K, on sale in 2 weeks. And when we see a speech bubble from Miles Mayhem says, and they're working for me. So yeah, we've got the savage sumos coming next week in the storyline called Kamikaze. So we will have to see what's going to happen with that particular issue. I hope you liked that. Like I say, M.A.S.K is brilliant. That comic, I really enjoyed it. One or two wee things, as I said, going through it that I wasn't quite keen on, such as the way that Thunderhawk was flying one way, then it seemed to be crashing another way. The cannons on Jackhammer seemed to be on top of each other, ran side by side. And then also the centre page spread looking too much like the toy. Whether or not they were asked to do that by Kenner to make it look like the toy, I'm not too sure. It's still a great image though, and it's still a great comic. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I do have an idea for what we could do for the next one, if it works. So hopefully it will work, but in the meantime, I better get Condor back to Brad, so I'll see you next time. Cheers. Thanks for watching.